Hey, what's up? I'm Andrea Pillar. Some of you on here might remember me from hosting the Women in Soccer launch party, but for the last 3 years, I've also been co-creator and co-host of my very own soccer podcast called the Full Kit Wankers podcast. In our short time as podcasters, we've done a live show, interviewed professional soccer players and coaches, and even been asked to cover tournaments live on Twitch, which was super fun, by the way. I genuinely love podcasting, even though a lot of people will tell you, especially if you tell them, I want to start a podcast, they'll say it's a saturated market, and that's true. There's a lot of podcasts out there, but I genuinely believe there's a place for everyone. If you've been wanting to start a podcast, but you've literally no idea where to start, you don't really know what to do next, this little ditty in my parents' backyard is for you. First things first, you need to ask yourself these questions. Why do you want to start a podcast? Who do you want to talk to? These are the most important considerations. What do you add to the conversation, and what is your niche, right? So my co-host and I are both Colombian Americans, and we were a little tired of not hearing our own voices represented, especially in soccer media. There's a lot of soccer podcasts out there, or there are a lot, but they are genuinely dominated by white male voices, which is fine, but we were looking to add a little something different to the situation. We also don't take ourselves that seriously, and we really like to shoot the shit when it comes to soccer chisme. So we knew there'd be a market for fun and informational soccer gossip, right? Because people love that. Once you've figured out your why, it's time to figure out how. So you need to start the very beginning, brainstorm a name. That sounds so basic, but it actually took us forever to figure out what our name was going to be. I have a technique where I like to brainstorm by writing like a word cloud surrounding the topic at hand. So every word I could think of that associated with what we were trying to accomplish and what kind of message we were trying to give across with our name. And I would just write it all out and kind of circle 3 to 5 of the most important words and see kind of what comes up from there, what kind of ideas can come from there. And honestly, that is how it happened for us, but everyone has a different technique. Names are crucial though. Crucial, right? It represents everything about your brand, and it's gonna catch people's attention or won't. After the name comes the logo. So apps like Canva are free. Like, we do not need, I love graphic designers, no disrespect, but you should pay them for their work. And if you can't afford to, design your own logo on Canva or any of these apps. It's very simple. No one is asking for like a professional level logo. Honestly, you can even start out by taking a high quality picture of yourself or you and your podcast co-host, and just use like a fun font with your title on top. As long as it's catchy, it's vibrant, people will love it. And make sure it's in square format. That is a whole different situation. All right, next, most importantly, content is key. I hate the word content because it just gets thrown around a lot these days, but good content will attract listeners. It'll get you followers, it'll get subscriptions. No matter what else is going on, plan your content. What do you plan to cover episode to episode? Do you have seasons? Will they have arcs? Is it storytelling? Is it more day to day? Plan your content, know what you're going to talk about. Now this will evolve. If you listen to the first episode of our podcast and you listen to the podcast now, it's a completely different podcast, and that's natural, that's normal. But we did have a plan, and we did know what we were going to talk about, and we didn't stray from that. Lastly, logistics. How long do you want the episodes to be? They shouldn't vary very much in length, right? Yes, some will run longer than others, and that's perfectly normal. But if people come into your episodes expecting 30-minute episodes, and all of a sudden they have an hour and a half, that's a big change. So I would recommend coming up with a kind of time plan and then running with it if things change, but have an idea of how. How often do you want to post episodes? Are you trying to post them once a week, twice a week, once a month? This is very important. What day of the week do you want to release the episodes? Depending, for us, soccer, the schedule was so hectic on the weekends that we thought, okay, people will want to listen to a podcast at the beginning of the week, right after the weekend. So we record on Mondays, but everyone has a different situation. Plan for it. What day of the week will you record? Where will you record? What host site will you use? That is the site where you upload your podcast, and that shares it with all the platforms that you're using. What platforms do you want to use? Our podcast is available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio. So that's the kind of thing you want to really plan out. And then it's time to get the equipment. Now, this can be the most overwhelming step, and I know it was for me. I not an audio engineer. I'm not technical at all when it comes to that. So, I mean, I'm recording this on my iPhone, so like that's how advanced we are. Though this is nice picture quality, I have to say. Thank you, Tim Cook, or whatever. But you need to get equipment. It doesn't have to be the most elaborate. Depending on your budget, which you can totally set yourself, we found that at the beginning, we were cool with just using my MacBook with GarageBand and USB mics and a USB splitter so that we could plug in several mics at once. That's it. That's all we use. And like headphones that we got at Best Buy. Nothing crazy, nothing elaborate. So please don't feel pressured to buy $1,000 worth of audio equipment when honestly, most people can't tell the difference. Please audio engineers don't come after me. Of course it's important to have clean, clear audio. I don't recommend recording at an airport outside, but I do say, depending on your budget, don't feel stressed if certain recommended podcasting mics are way out of your budget, because there are some very easily within your budget that you can easily get. And I even know people who use their MacBooks microphone built in, so they don't even bother, and their quality is still fine. Anyway, if you're gonna work with a partner or multiple partners, I highly recommend doling out responsibilities right at the jump. Okay, what everybody feels like doing, what their fortes are. There's nothing worse than a group project where one person does all the work. And I know half of you know what I'm talking about. And so it's important to be like, okay, I personally love the writing, the editing. I like the promoting. I like reaching out to potential guests. But I don't really love like the SEO or like posting it on the platform or like deciding when we're recording or recording it myself. Those things kind of give me anxiety. Like I just don't enjoy it as much as the other things. So my podcast host and I, we delegate, which is very important. So please be clear with your podcast partners, because that has been the death of a lot of podcasts. A partnership that just doesn't work out. A weekly podcast entails the following. Please don't get overwhelmed. But basically you have to write some kind of notes for the episode, schedule the recording, set up and break down equipment. You have to reach out to potential guests, schedule them, record, edit, sound mix an episode, upload it to the host site, add SEO, promote the podcast through various social media channels, and then keep those channels running throughout the week with just new content or whatever, just to keep things alive, You have to create promo material, whether it's video or audio. There has to be something to post, right? Or promo shots. You have to schedule live performances and then write live performances if that's something you're interested in doing. You have to create a website. And all that encompasses the crazy amount of work it is to run a successful podcast. And I have to be honest, I struggle with these all the time. I'm not killing it. Like my podcast is doing great. I'm really proud of it. But all of those things, they can be overwhelming when that's not your main source of income. So don't feel overwhelmed by that. Just know that if you are going to take the plunge into starting your own podcast, those things come with the territory. Most importantly, and the thing that I urge you to remember, is consistency is key. And I suck at consistency. So I have to say I'm totally talking out of my ass, but I know it matters. If you really want to go for this, you should strive to post at the same time, the same day when people expect the episode to drop. And we've really had a hard time with this because life comes up and your schedule changes, and it's completely normal, but it's not normal for an audience. They expect the episode when they expect it. And I get so filled with anxiety when people text me like, or they message us, where's the episode? I'm like, oh God. So it's very stressful, but it's super important. Don't take like weird, unexpected hiatuses. Don't randomly post and then, like surprise post. Like you're not Beyonce. This isn't Lemonade. People want it when they want it, right? Lack of consistency can kill a podcast. And the second thing I would say is, the stats support that most podcasts quit after the first season because it can take a while to build an audience. What we found is our first season was really good because we were just like nailing it. We were so inspired. We were so passionate, ready to go. And then when we didn't see that boom, that we went viral, that explosion, we were like, ugh. And it became like drudgery, especially second season slum. And I would just urge you to see something through. Have patience. It can take a while to build up an audience, and you would rather market to and speak to 200 people that love what you're doing and that care and that engage with you, your niche, your proper niche, than have 1,000 downloads of people who aren't listening to your material. So really embrace the people that are fans that love your show, engage with them, and don't lose sight of that, because what you started this podcast not to become like a famous, hopefully, but because you are truly passionate about what the topic of your podcast is. So like, I know all of this can sound super overwhelming, and hosting a podcast can be overwhelming, but honestly, it's one of my favorite things that I've ever done. It's a blast. I slid into an MLS player's DMs once, just slid right in. Like, called him hot on the podcast. I don't recommend doing that, by the way. Tagged him in a promo. He and I had met once. It's such a long, very not a part of this video story. But anyway, and I slid into his DMs and it worked. He came on the podcast. We became friends. Like, that's the crazy thing. I get to hang out with one of my best friends once a week, talk shit about soccer. It's something I super look forward to. My friend and I have only gotten closer because we have to work so closely together. And if you're passionate enough about something to podcast about it, you should do it. If you have more detailed questions for me, if you have any questions for me, I mean, you can comment on this video, but also please feel free to DM me. Slide into my DMs, because I want to help you start your podcast or anything of the sort regarding content creation or entertainment. I'm happy to help. So please drop into my DMs or email me and my podcast host at fullkitwankerspodcast@gmail.com. And like, shameless plug, but you can listen to our podcast on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify, and it's called Full Kit Wankers Podcast. Yeah, so I hope this was helpful, and get podcasting, and peace out, women in soccer.